Hello, everyone, and welcome to Blogging Theology. And today I'm delighted to welcome Dr. Shadee Elmasry and Naz Hassan. You're most welcome, gentlemen. Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum salam.
Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullahi wa
Thanks for
barakatuh.
having us.
It's
thank
great
you.
to see both. The three of us today is usually two, but so that's cool. Now, this podcast is about a new book called Pearls in the Deep. That's my copy by Naz Hassan. And it asks, one of the questions it asks is, if God exists, then why do bad things happen? Now, there are many books actually about the so-called problem of evil on the market, and I've seen a few of them. And when I was first introduced to this book, I must admit I was not terribly interested in it. Yet another book on this subject, please. And there's already some very good books out there. But I'm deeply grateful to Dr. Elmasry for sending me a copy all the way from America. It's an extremely well-written book, deeply erudite and full of realism as well as wisdom. So it's not like panaceas and some self-help manual. It's realistic and it's wise. And I recommend it to everyone wholeheartedly. And today, I'm honored to meet the author and Dr. Shadee again. Dr. Shadee has been on before, of course. Yeah. So just a brief bio introduction for you both. Dr. Shadee was born and raised in New Jersey in America. He began studying at the age of 18, traveling to a number of countries, including Egypt, KSA, Yemen, and Morocco. In addition to traditional learning, Dr. Elmasry has received an MA from the George Washington University and a PhD from the University of London, at SOAS, literally a couple of miles away from here. Dr. Elmasry went on to teach at several universities, including Yale University, SOAS, Trinity College, Harvard Seminary, and Manhattanville College. Currently, he serves as scholar in residence at the New Brunswick Islamic Center in New Jersey, and is the founder and head of Safina Society, which offers classes on-site and online through arcview.org. And I'll put links to all these in the description box below. Naz Hassan graduated in computer science and English literature from Drexel University in Philadelphia. He's been a student of Arabic and Islamic sciences for many years and has studied at the Al Salam Institute in the UK and Safina Society's Darul Fath in New Jersey. And he studied the works of Said Nursi through the aid of the Spruce Circle based in Philadelphia in the USA. So welcome, gentlemen. And the first question I think has got to be asked, perhaps Naz can address this. How do we understand the idea of evil? How do we understand it?
A'udhu billahi minash shaitanir rajeem. Bismillahir rahmanir rahim. Thank you for the question, Paul. I think one of the great difficulties with understanding the problem of evil specifically is the definition of evil itself. And there's a lot of vagueness, let's say, when we try to understand what evil actually means. I think, and you can correct me if I'm wrong on this, that from a lot of people's perspectives, when we talk about evil, they think of a force that is inexplicable. They think of a force that is sort of malignant, that is, it's out to get you or something of this nature, right? And they sort of lump a lot of different concepts under evil. So it tends to become like anything that I don't like is just evil. But if we look at this question a little bit deeply, we see that the first thing that comes to mind when we talk about evil is pain. So physical pain. And you can also add emotional pain to it as well. And if you look a little bit deeply, we can't say that every single pain is evil. And the reason for this is that there are some pains that we voluntarily take on, and we voluntarily actually we celebrate it. Like there was a Eagles game last night. Eagles is a football team here in the USA, and these guys, these running backs, they're just running headlong into like a group of people, and they're getting beat down, and he gets up and everyone's patting him in the back. I mean, that's not pretty fun to be, to get beat down by like 10 people. So we celebrate pain, in sports. People willingly go to medical school to become a doctor and get tons of money. People do ultra marathon running, and there's a certain pain that someone doesn't need to go through, but they willingly go through, which is becoming pregnant, right? I mean, this is one of the biggest pains that you can imagine that a woman has to go through, but she
Well,
willingly does it.
and for us men, of course, well, for me anyway, it's going to the dentist. I willingly pay someone who I know is going to cause me pain.
Right.
But one endures it, and nevertheless.
Exactly.
So I don't blame the dentist. I don't think he's a horrible man or woman for doing that. It's part of the process, obviously.
Exactly. Yeah. So pain, we can't really say that pain itself, just by its very nature, is evil. Now, the second thing we can sort of think about when we talk about evil is the violation of our will, right? And usually people will bring up the example of rape, which is an awful crime. And in rape, like, what is the difference between rape and just consensual relationship, right? From the outside, it doesn't really look any different if there's no violence, right? It doesn't look any different at all. But what's happening is the violation of someone's will. Something is happening to them against their will through force that they don't want to happen to them. And then now we have to ask, okay, is evil the violation of our will? Now, if we think about it a little bit more, we can't exactly say that as well, because there are many instances where we actually would want our will to be violated, right? Let's say we want to go do a crime. It's actually good that, a police officer apprehends you and stops you from doing that. A coach, for example, an unruly person on their team, a coach, he punishes that person and he says, you have to do what I tell you to do or you're off the team. A parent, this is the best example of people's wills being violated. And this is why, by the way, there's a lot of sort of liberal-minded Marxist type of people that believe the family is a tyrannical system, right? Because the will of the children are being violated. The child always wants to get candy, but the parent says, no, you can't, right? You can't, and the child cries. But from our perspective looking in, we say, okay, this is a good parent, right? This is a good parent. So we can't say that evil is your will being violated either. So what is the conclusion then? Like, what really is evil? The answer I come to in this book, and I think it really makes sense. I got this from Eleanor Stump in her discussion on theodicy, and she's a really brilliant Christian theologian. And I modified it obviously a little bit, that evil is when something happens and we perceive it to not contribute to our flourishing, right? Where something is happening to us or to something else, and we perceive it to not contribute to our flourishing, and that's number one. And number two, it's going against our heart's desires, right? It's going against our heart's desires. This is why, for example, I know a couple people, like, they really, really wanted to get into a certain school, and they didn't get in, and now they're having, like, a crisis of faith, and they're like, wow, what am I doing with my life? I mean, objectively speaking, this isn't pain, right? It's not your will being violated. It's an opportunity that you were given. But why does it feel so evil to that person? It's because, again, there's this component of you feel that something has happened to you that is going against your flourishing. And number two, the heart's desire that you really latched onto, it got cut. So I think this is a nice definition of evil. Now, the question that we have to ask ourselves is, why does God create a world in which other human beings can undercut our heart's desires? And are the things that are happening in the world, are they really against me? And are they really destroying my flourishing? So,
Dr. Shadee, what are your thoughts on that question?
I thought that was an awesome definition, because when we did a little tour here in New Jersey, the first thing I thought about was we have to get a simple and concise definition of what evil is. And as a result of this, a Muslim will never suffer evil. He may suffer pain, he may suffer hardship, but he will never suffer evil. And that's a really empowering idea. And it's one of the most, it's really at the heart of this book, is this idea that we can suffer a lot of things, but evil will never come upon us if we realize that literally every single hardship that we suffer is going to advance us in some way, shape, and form. And ultimately, there's another definition from Sheikh Nuh Hamim Keller. He defines evil as sins without disobedience. Disobedience without Tawbah.
Mm.
That's
say it again. Disobedience
without Tawbah.
Tawbah. So no disobedience without any repentance.
And it really, the two can come together. In the life of a Muslim, the only bad thing is their acts of disobedience that are not followed by Tawbah. Everything else could be painful, could be, in my eyes, miserable, but I know that in this life or the next, it's going to lead to my improvement in some way, shape, and form. So I could tolerate it. I can accept it.
Just on a slightly different tack here, looking at from the view of Christian theology, the dominant view in Christian theology has been, in terms of what is evil, is that it doesn't really exist. Well, let me explain what I mean. Augustine said that evil was the deprivation of the good. So evil wasn't a positive ontological force, like in the Hollywood version of the devil. The devil is just evil through and through. He was made like that. That's what. No, evil is the absence of good, actually. So it doesn't have a positive force. And you see this in Tolkien's Lord of the Rings. I remember when I first read Lord of the Rings, as a Christian, actually, I thought, hey, this is Augustinian theodicy, to give it its technical term, because the way evil is very subtly and amazingly explained and worked out through the drama and the characters and the story, is that evil is the absence of good, but it's not a good it's not a force in itself. Originally it didn't exist, but the withdrawal of goodness led ultimately to evil. And so Tolkien was a profoundly Catholic writer. I mean, he was quite open about that. Indeed, this was not an accident. So that's a very good literary expression, I think, of the dominant Christian understanding. There are other understandings, but that's the main one, I think, in Christianity. But in my experience, Islam has far more profound and convincing answers to these questions than I ever experienced as a Christian. As one of the things that astonished me when I first encountered Islam was the depth and the wisdom of its answers to profound questions of life, which Christianity, in my exploration of the classic text, the canonical texts, simply didn't have. And I was profoundly moved and surprised by that, because I really didn't expect to find any answers, because Christianity has given up in many ways having any answers. They've always been there in the Quran and the Sunnah, alhamdulillah.
Alhamdulillah. Paul, I just wanted to mention something. It's so nice that you mentioned the privation argument for evil, because the last chapter of this book is exactly taking that up, because the philosophical strain coming from Avicenna all the way to the Sufi tradition and Imam Nursi, the inspiration for this book, as well as Ibn Taymiyyah rahimahullah and other thinkers in the Islamic tradition, Ibn Arabi, that they also make this exact same argument. But I think the depth of the Islamic point of view, I think the conclusion from the Christian side is that God is not obligated to create more good. So if evil is parasitic on the good, then you remove evil if you create more good, right? But God is not obligated to create more good. Now, the Islamic worldview gives you an explanation for why this sort of world has been created rather than another sort of world. And it gives you that purpose. And I think we can't understand the point of evil if we don't understand the point of creation. You can't understand, if you look at the engine of a car, you have no idea what that thing is if you don't know what a car is, right? But as soon as you see a car, and as soon as you see where that engine has been placed and what it's doing, how it's connected to everything else, now it makes perfect sense, regardless of your aesthetic judgments of what that engine should look like or what it should do, right? So the same thing with evil, that if we understand the purpose of creation, which the Quran is all about this, right? The prophetic life is all about this. If we understand that purpose, then evil fits in nicely with
okay, but let's focus on that very point. What's the value then of creating creatures like us who can do moral evil? What's the value in doing that?
Right. So there's a really interesting idea in Islamic metaphysics, and I'm not telling any Muslims to believe this. It's not part of our aqidah, but there's this idea of maratib al-wujud, right? The different planes of existence, the different levels of reality. And I think your friend Sheikh Hassan Spiker, he'll really like this as well. So there are different planes of existence, and God is the creator of all of those planes of existence. And each plane of existence, each world, is meant to fulfill a certain function, and it's meant to have a certain outcome or display a certain beauty that God wished to display. Now the question is, what is the function of our plane of existence, which is the realm of conscious creatures? And now if you look in the Quran, the function of this realm is a thawab and iqab. It's reward and punishment. It's good and evil. It's these comparisons, right? And through that, what does it achieve? It achieves a good that another type of realm can't achieve. What is this good? Nursi gives an example. He gives the example of a farmer who he takes a lot of seeds and he throws it into a fertile land. And now not all of these seeds are going to sprout and become a beautiful tree. But even if one of those seeds sprouted and became a giant tree and produces fruits, then you would say that this farmer is successful and this farmer is smart and he's done a good job. And human souls have this type of potential within them. They're like seeds. All human souls have certain talents, certain potentialities, and we can say that the technology which brings out this potential and allows this human being to reach the full height of whatever God intended for them, the technology or the fertilizer, you can say, is evil, right? It is exactly difficulties, trials, and tests which allow for human beings to strive in the cause of God, mujahada. And this is why Satan exists, right? Satan is the greatest example of what this is. He is like, the person who turns the gears, right? And when you're turning the gears and the engine is starting, on the other side, you're producing saints, you're producing prophets, you're producing these beautiful exemplars of human beings that reflect perfectly the attributes of God. So in our plane of existence, this is the purpose, right? And the way evil works is that it's like that fertilizer that produces these incredible human beings. And we see this actually very succinctly in the Quran, in I believe it's chapter 67, Surah Al-Mulk, that where God says, "Tabarakalladhi biyadihi al-mulk wa huwa ala kulli shay'in qadir," that glory be to, blessed be the hands of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and He has control over all things, letting you know that He didn't need to create a world with difficulties, right? هُوَ الَّذِي خَلَقَ الْمَوْتَ وَالْحَيَاةَ. He created death and life. لِيَبْلُوَكُمْ أَيُّكُمْ أَحْسَنُ عَمَلًا. Right? To test like which of you will be the best in deeds. So you can see here, God says, look, I'm powerful over all things. I didn't need to create this. There's, I already created a perfect world, the world of the angels. No one suffers there. Everyone's worshiping. Everyone's being nice. Everyone's in bliss. But I created this world for this specific purpose, right? And so it really shows you the wisdom behind the creation of conscious beings, because there's no other beings that could possibly reflect the type of perfections that human beings are able to reflect. So, and that's really the wisdom behind conscious creatures.
I think, Nazan, what you said, pain is definitely part of the process. Hardship is part of the process. So here's a question. What transforms someone from viewing something as pain versus viewing it as evil?
Yeah. And I think what transforms that is seeing this idea that pain or evil, let's say difficulties, right? Trials and tribulations are the fertilizer. They're the fertilizer to bring out the potentials that we already have within us. Now, when Muslims see this line in the Quran that Allah's testing us, it's not a right translation of the word bala. Bala can also mean to bless, right? وَإِذِ ابْتَلَى إِبْرَاهِيمَ رَبُّهُ بِكَلِمَاتٍ, right? In Surah Al-Baqarah, where Allah made him the Imam of the nations, right? So this is a favor to Ibrahim alayhi salam. So bala can also mean blessing. So the right thing to say is education, that life is an education, and it educates us to know God, to experience God, and to reflect the attributes of God. This is really what it is. And you have, I have, all of us, we have all the things that we need, just like the seed. The seed has everything that it needs, right? Inside the seed is the tree, right? Inside the seed is the vine, is the tree, is the fruit, is every successive thing, as Imam Nursi says. But once you have the fertilizer, everything can come out. So if we see it that way, and we don't see that, oh, God is testing me, how am I going to pass the test. They're a lot of people, they're trying to get into medical school. They're stressed out about the MCATs. These guys, they've made such a hard test for me, right? I'm just trying to get into med school. I'm going to completely fail this test, right? So a lot of people get scared because they feel like, oh, I don't have the preparation needed. But the preparation for this test has already been given to you. The human will, the human soul, it has everything that it needs to reach the potential that was meant for you. So if we see it that way, then, these difficulties and trials, they become sort of challenges and educations for us that our Lord is taking us through.
Very good. Okay. I just want to slightly change of tack. In your book, you mentioned the brothers Karamazov. It's a novel by Dostoevsky, the Russian novelist in the 19th century. And I read it, and his Crime and Punishment as well. I do recommend these books. If you want to, I don't mean you, Naz, you read it. But if people haven't read the brothers Karamazov, it's a fantastic novel by one of the greatest Russian novelists ever, along with Tolstoy. And without going into what the novel's about, it's about many things. But there is a very sustained focus on the problem of evil, its philosophical implications, and how we struggle. And one of the central characters, Ivan, is the devil's advocate in a way, literally and metaphorically, and really presents the best case from the devil. An innocent person struggling and suffering, a child. I won't go into it now, but it's a very, very brilliant, insightful book written by Dostoevsky. I do recommend that as well. But coming to the next question, if I may, about this thing about evil again, and God's creating us, and is God creating evil? The Mutazilites, these are early rationalist kind of Muslims, usually theologians or philosophers, posited that human beings create their own actions, both good and evil, because God cannot create evil actions. If, according to many Sunni scholars, God even creates everything in the universe, including our actions, how do we square this with evil in the world? I mean, does God create evil? Is he responsible for it?
Yeah. So thank you for the question, Paul. I think here is a very unique perspective of the nature of evil in the Muslim tradition, because if God is creating everything in the world, including my own actions, we can genuinely ask, how is God absolved from also creating evil and being ascribed with evil? And the answers that the Ash'ari and the Maturidi tradition has settled on is this idea of the acquisition of actions, or kasb. And the way to describe this, and people make it way more complicated than I think than it needs to be. It's a very simple idea. And the simple idea is that we have will as human beings, but we don't have power to carry out that will. There's a difference between irada, our will, and the qudra, the power to carry it out. And even in our daily life, we know this. If, let's say, I want to jump, I like playing basketball, I want to jump 6 feet into the air and do a slam dunk. I don't have that power, right? I have the will to do it. I don't have the power. And let's say I'm let's say something happens to my arm and I get paralyzed. I want to lift a glass of water. I don't have the power to do so, right? I have the will, but I don't have the power. So God creates the power to do all of the actions of human beings. It's that simple. And everything that happens in the world, God creates the power to do those things. So if I want to drink a glass of water, my intention is a dua to God, and God fulfills that, and I'm able to pick it up. I drink the water. In the same way, if a criminal, the laws of nature are consistent because God is consistent. If a criminal, he uses his knife and he stabs somebody, that power is created by God, but that intention belongs to me. And so God creates the death, right? When someone kills somebody, but God does not create the murder. The murder is ascribed to you.
He creates the means, but not the end. The end is will.
Exactly.
The means, because God creates everything in the universe, is willed by God, because everything is willed by God. So,
well, you could say he creates the means and the ends, but your intention is what colors it into a good deed or a bad deed. He created the murder, the gun, and the death. but he didn't create murder. You're the one who murdered. You transformed the death into murder with your intent.
Exactly.
Right? So the guilt is not assigned to the creator. The guilt is assigned to the one who intended to break the creator's laws.
Yeah.
So that's where I like what Naz said here is that he said, God created the death, but the killer is guilty of murder.
Yeah.
That's
because of the intention.
Yeah.
Exactly. And just to get into the weeds a little bit more, there's also debate on, well, did God create the intention as well? Right? Because this is a serious question, and this is something that Ibn Taymiyyah rahimahullah criticizes the Asharis for. And now if you say God creates the intention, now there's some serious problems with this, because then there's no such thing as free will, right? And Ibn Taymiyyah rahimahullah actually bites the bullet. He says that yes, God creates the intention, right? And but he says there's still free will. I don't know how he makes sense of that, but you can see in Dr. Sherman Jackson's book, he has a discussion on this. But
which book is that? Sorry, Dr.
This is Islam and the Problem of Black Suffering.
Oh, that one. Yes.
Yeah, as unrelated as it sounds to this, theological question, that book is such an excellent book to present.
I don't have. I really want to get a hold of that.
It's very good. It's very good.
Yeah.
But we can't say that God creates the intention. We cannot. And later Asharis, they have given some sort of some arguments sort of against it. They say that, well, intention is not something physical. It's not real, which is why Asharis, they only believe that what exists is some type of substance, right? Some type of physical substance is what exists in the universe. And the intention itself is not something physical. So that's not something that God is creating. But either way, it's a mystery to us where this intention comes from, how it's ascribed to us, but it must be ascribed to us, because if we don't ascribe it to us, then we're saying that everything is God. We're saying that God kills and God punishes himself.
And the day of judgment becomes a facade, because
God is judging himself.
You can't be held accountable for anything.
Exactly. And not only that, because God is the one who created the intention, it means God is the one who intended to do these things. And so on the day of judgment, God is judging himself and punishing himself and rewarding himself, which doesn't make any sense, right? So there must be creation and the creator. There must be the separation there, right? And even though there is some blending in the ideas of the Sufi mystics, but there must be this essential separation between our will and God's will. And God's will is over our will. That's completely fine, but our intention belongs to us. This is the basis of our moral responsibility.
And it's the basis of how we categorize acts. Right. So
yeah, exactly.
As you said earlier, you could have the same act, but with the intent, that act becomes a good deed. With intent, it becomes a bad deed. All of them are divine creations, but we're connected to that act through an intention, and that's what makes us rewardable or punishable on the day of judgment.
Exactly. Yep.
Yeah. So, but the next question would be: how can we explain why so many evil people do not get punished? I was going to think of certain prominent American politicians who have got away with murder, and I mean that literally. I mean, they've been held to account through various war crimes and attacks on people. Anyway, yet good people seem to face many hardships. How do we explain that, Naz?
Yeah, this is really one of the biggest issues that a lot of Christians have, and even Stephen Fry, he went on an interview, he said the same thing, and really, we can't turn to anything else besides Revelation to answer this, right? And even Imam Nursi, as many of the arguments that he presents, they're very beautiful, they're incredible. But even he says that, look, that if God didn't tell us what the end result of this human life was going to be, then it's a joke, right? That God shows his wisdom and mercy in creation, by crafting the most beautiful things in the way that he's structured the universe, in the way that he shows all these attributes in his creation, but we don't see even 1/10 of that, as Imam Nursi says, in this specific area of justice, right? We do see, bad people being struck down. We do see bad people, like, for example, in the stories of the prophets. We see Abu Lahab, he's the one who loses. We see Abu Jahl, that great prophets, they win in the best possible way, and their villains are humiliated in the worst possible way. We see this, that mercy is being shown to us by God. But why don't we see this in other areas of life? And so Imam Nursi has he has a beautiful analogy, and he says that, look, small crimes, right, they're reserved for immediate punishments and small local courts. So if you got a parking ticket, they're not going to take you to the Supreme Court for it, right? Unless this is something like, I don't know, I can't think of a situation where that would happen. But the officer comes and he gives you the parking ticket, right? If you were caught with, like, I don't know, 0.1 grams of cocaine or something, the officer might slap you and tell you, confiscated.
Unless you're in Singapore, and then it's a mandatory death sentence. Serious, it is. Any trafficking of drugs in Singapore is a mandatory death sentence.
Okay.
Yeah.
Wow.
But hey, we're not talking about there. Yeah.
Well, maybe Singapore has a wisdom to do that, right? So small crimes, you're punished immediately, and it's taken care of immediately. This is what we experience in our life. But large crimes that have a magnitude that like you can't even think, such as the Holocaust, right? Such as these awful things that have happened in World War II. These serial killers, right? Gruesome murders, trafficking, sexual trafficking, all these like awful things. What ends up happening? Sometimes the police, they'll actually let you commit more of the crimes, right? Because you're covering your tracks so well. So the police will let you commit more of the crimes and gather more evidence. And then once they got you, it's over. And the trial is public. The trial is broadcasted all over the news. Your entire family is exposed, right? You're exposed. Your entire past is exposed. And you're given, the judge will, they'll call out, like, we sentence you to 990 days of 990 years life sentence, right? Yeah. So you're humiliated before the entire world. So big crimes, Nursi says, are for big courts. Therefore, more honorable courts, right? And he gets an analogy from this to God's justice, that small crimes are punished by God in this world, and huge crimes, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala allows these people to sometimes do more evil, to gather more evidence. And on the day of judgment, these people are absolutely embarrassed in front of the whole creation. And they're given the most punishment reserved for them. Because in this world, Hitler, the amount of suffering that he's caused people, he shot himself and he's gone. I mean, it just doesn't make any sense that such a person can just get away with that. And so on the day of judgment, though, there's no getting away. So the ways to answer this question that you asked, Paul, is that we know from Revelation that there is a day of judgment, and there will be punished in the most fitting way. And second, small crimes are reserved for small courts, and big crimes are reserved for big courts.
It's a great analogy, I must say. It's a great analogy.
And I have to also, the point that you looked at Revelation is needed, is that the issue of evil is a subset of the issue of purpose of existence. Like it comes after that. And we could deduce a lot with our brains and our observations, but purpose of life can only come through revelation. Yeah. And this problem of evil, cannot be answered secularly. Like a secular Muslim could say, you know what, I get that there's a creator, but it stopped. I'm going to stop there. Or a secular person. But purpose of life and why bad things occur have to be intertwined with revelation. At some point, you have to submit to revelation. Yeah. You can't be a secularist and have an answer to this.
True. Okay, perhaps we just change tack slightly in a different direction. And in the next question, what does it mean when Muslims say that trials and tribulations bring one closer to God? how could suffering possibly bring us closer to God?
Yeah, so this is one of the questions I take up in the book. I think it's very important because Muslim speakers and preachers, they always say this line. And, when I was growing up, it just always bothered me. It's like, how is it possible that I'm going through something difficult and I'm suffering and this is supposed to get me closer to God? It just doesn't seem, rather, when you're in luxury and when you're getting blessings, you should be grateful for God, right? This is what should get you closer to God. Now, Nursi has an answer to this, obviously, as well. When there's a lot of things on the table, let's say you have a very cluttered table, right? Tons of books. I'm sure both of you are like very erudite people. So, your table's tons of books, pens, this, that, letters, whatever it may be. And then someone comes along and says, Maria Kondo, let's say you hire her, the Japanese woman that she's known for minimalism, right? She throws out everything that you don't need. So you hire her and you're saying remodel this entire room. So she comes along, she says, you're only allowed 3 things on this table. Nothing else. Just 3 things. Everything else has to go. It has to leave. Now, immediately what happens is you start to see what's actually important on the table. Right? Before, everything that came in, you just sort of threw on the table. Oh, I got this new book, put on the table. I got this, put on the table.
I see where you're going. I see.
Yeah, exactly. So, and now Maria Kondo, she has her stick with her. She's like, you got to throw everything out. Only 3 things. Now you see, oh, you know what? Okay, I have to, I usually read the Quran. I'll put the Quran on the table. I need my monitor. I need this. That's it. And you get super, super clarity on what's important to you. And in the same way, when some of our blessings are being taken away, let's say we are in heedlessness, we don't really care about prayer, we don't really understand this idea that God takes care of us, right? God's showering us with blessings. We don't really understand that. What does that mean, God's taking care of us? I go to work, I make the money, I cook the food, I do groceries. What do you mean God's taking care of me, right? Oh, now what ends up happening? Well, now you lose your job, right? Now, let's say there's a food shortage. There's, what happened when the war in Ukraine started. There was like wheat shortages all over the world. Now you're losing things. And now you begin to see how God takes care of you, right? That how little you actually need. And you start to see like the most minuscule ways in which God is present in your life and how he's closer to you than your jugular vein, as the Quran says. Even when you're sick, I had a really bad sore throat a couple of weeks ago, and it was just so hard to swallow like just regular food or water. Like you couldn't even drink water. And then when you were swallowing it, if you recognize, you see like all these intricate movements that are required just for you to drink water. And you think to yourself, man, this was happening for me automatically, right? And now, like I'm having such difficulty doing this, I recognize, wow, like I just want to drink water again, man. I'm so grateful just to be able to drink cold water, right? Yeah. So this is how like trials and difficulties bring us closer to God, and I think like it's a really beautiful perspective to have.
I think I'm reminded actually of the AA programs, the Alcoholic Anonymous programs. So you'll get just people who obviously become addicted to alcohol, and it drags them down into the pit ultimately. And that how you respond when you're at that deep horrible level. And if you at that point, you begin to reevaluate your life. And you come to realize there's a higher power, God, who does care for you, and you turn to God. And this whole process is a very spiritual program, but you simplify your life, you focus on what really matters, and you discover what will save you as well. It's not that higher income, that better job, that whatever car, whatever. It's God, actually, who will rescue you. And so that program is very profound. And this is ostensibly a secular program. I mean, it's not anyway referring to Revelation. I know Revelation is essential. It doesn't make reference to Revelation as far as I'm aware. But nevertheless, it's really got to the essence of one of the dynamics of your point, which is getting away of the clutter, getting what's essential through the pain of being powerless over alcohol. or whatever other addiction it may be, and then working through that, going through the pain, and ultimately discovering what really matters, which is and dealing with your own faults, but and also the sin in your life, but also discovering relying on God exclusively. You surrender to God. Use that language, surrender, which is Islam, submitting to God. Very, very powerful, and it works for countless millions, I guess, of people throughout the world who are powerless over their addiction to alcohol. So I think that is amplified even there.
It's huge.
Yeah. Sorry, do you have something to say, Dr. Shadee?
Yeah, I wanted to go back to the Christian explanation. So this problem of evil is such a huge issue for a lot of people because there's no answer. Islam gives a very simple answer that satisfies and you move on with it. And we're actually able to handle the concept of severe calamities coming down on people and recognizing God's mercy simultaneously. So in your background, what was a typical answer that a priest would give or something?
Gosh, that's a good question. I mean, I think when I was a Christian, I think one of the things I noticed, and it is in the particular brand of Christianity that I was mostly involved in for most of the time, which was evangelicalism, the portrayal of God, the understanding of God, he's not so much God Almighty as God Almighty. God is your mate. Now, he's our Father, or more. I know they call him our Father or Jesus, but he's basically your mate, your friend, or like a granddad who just a grandparent who just gives you gifts. It's just nice to you, and so he's characterized and perceived to be a very, very loving God who just cares for you and loves you, and that's it, really. And so when problems happen, when a child dies, or catastrophe happens, how do you cope? Because I thought God was not so much God Almighty, but not Almighty, but God Almighty. And where is my mate? Now they don't use the word mate, but I'm that's my characterization of what's really going on. Actually, so God is brought down to our level very much as our friend. I know it sounds very challenging, this kind of language. Although Abraham, Abraham had God as a friend. I know it's there in the Quran, but. So basically, because they don't have a very nuanced and a very complete understanding of God that we get in the names and attributes of God in the Quran, it can be a problem. And I remember a year or two ago, the Archbishop of Canterbury, Justin Welby, here in England, who's the head of the Anglican Communion, including the Episcopal churches in the United States and Canada and elsewhere, he was asked about this. So there had been some incident when some innocent people had died. I don't remember what they were. And he was very troubled by this. And he said that it caused him to doubt the existence of God sometimes. Wow. It really got to the heart of his faith. So what he said was he clung to Jesus, but still it caused him to doubt. And that was it, really. I mean, he had no deeper wisdom or explanation. And I read also in the Bible, and in the Jewish Bible, we had the incredible story of Jonah, of course. Job. And Job, of course, because there's a discussion between God and the accuser, who's Satan, but not the Christian Satan, who's the devil. There's a different role in Judaism. Anyway, so basically Satan says, "But if I remove all these blessings from Job's life, he will curse you, God." So basically, God allows Job to undergo these trials and tribulations. He loses his wealth, his family, his health, even so. And in the end, Job doesn't know what's going on. There's a kind of thing going on behind the scenes. And he goes on for chapter after chapter, and then his friends turn on him and blame him for his suffering, because God wouldn't do this to a good, righteous man, would he? You're suffering because of your own sin, Job. It's your fault, basically. These are Job's accusers. It's a terrible story. So this goes on for chapter, ages and ages and ages. And in the end, God speaks out of the whirlwind, out of the abyss, to poor old Job. And basically says, well, I mean, you can read it for yourself, but the answer seems to be like, well, you don't know the answer. I'm bigger than you. This is to you is a mystery. I'm not going to give you an answer in that simple way at all. And you left with, I felt profoundly unsatisfied. There wasn't really any fuller explanation. The Job was told, well, you've got to put up with it, mate. I'm God. Full stop. Except that I'm God and you're not. And that's it. That's the end of it. That's my very crude, simplistic summary. But you get these kind of gropings towards an explanation that don't really go beyond a fairly limited range of explanations, to be honest. But I will say, in the traditional Christian view, it must be stated that they do believe in the day of judgment. They do believe in heaven and hell. So they do believe in eschatological vindication of the people who suffer, who are poor and the weak, especially. And they do believe that the wicked will be punished. It's there in the Gospels repeatedly. Jesus speaks more about hellfire in the whole of the Bible than anyone else.
Wow.
It's true. I mean, Paul doesn't talk about hell
nice.
much, but Jesus, look at Matthew's Gospel, it's chock-a-block full of Jesus warning about hellfire, much more than anyone else does. So the real warning there is, there is punishment, there's retribution for the wicked. The wicked will be punished; they'll be held to account, and that tradition is found also in the, if I can put it that way, is that teaching is found in the Quran as well. Unfortunately, in my experience, most churches today, including evangelical churches, hardly ever mention hellfire. It's kind of disappeared from the touchy-feely, feel-good Christianity. We don't want to put people off, so we'll have guitars and drums and big kind of disco or club-like service. Let's not mention hellfire. But if you read the Gospels, particularly Matthew, Mark, and Luke, it's all over the place, and it's there in the Quran. It is meant to warn us, to call us to repentance, to awareness of the eschatological destiny if we really do not obey God and treat people justly and do what we're here to do. So there's some sort of basic reflections, I think, on that.
So I think there's in the modern period, the world wars really shot down Christianity pretty badly, because people
First World War particularly,
first, they couldn't cope with it, right? Because they didn't have this doctrine. Let's shift to the second thing that really almost has put the nail in the coffin, which is when another form of evil that exists in the world is when people of religious reputation, of religious functions in the world, end up doing the worst deeds to their flock, right? Because that's the other thing that's almost, I would feel that you had the Reformations, the Protestant Reformation had, Martin Luther had his problems, right? Or the issues that he dealt with that give a severe blow to Catholicism. Then you had the World Wars, both Catholicism and Protestantism. Now you move into the modern period where, in Boston, it's almost like Boston, these places where it had a huge Catholic presence, it's like 50% of the kids will testify that, crazy stuff was going on and they were being touched and molested and raped, etc. So that's another kind of evil that is now, we Muslims are also, as the Prophet, peace be upon him, said, what they will do, at least someone from your ummah, from our ummah, will fall into the same thing. And we're seeing that happen over the course of time, is that there are Muslims falling into these same traps of Iblis, these same sins. And these are huge fissures for people's faith if they don't have the right aqidah. And this time it's the aqidah of that human beings, the nature of human beings, and that you never elevate beyond being a human, no matter how much religion you get involved in and how much you teach. And therefore, to a degree, you have to always be treated like that. So let's talk about that form of evil too, which is very relevant to us today.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, that's very very insightful comments there, and I think it really relates to the question of how do human beings really fall into evil? Like even the most religious people, I actually reject the idea that some of these people are actually religious or even representative of the deen, right? But even then, outwardly seeming righteous people, how do they fall into all of these things? And even just human beings in general, how do they treat each other so awfully? And there's been a range of explanations, both from the Quran and the scholars who looked at these things. And one of the most compelling explanations that I found personally was that the root of all evil behavior comes from apathy and neglect. It comes from heedlessness, and that this is the root cause of all of the evil that follows afterwards. And if you look at the Quran, when Allah speaks about the people that are ghafil, the people that are heedless, that He always associates them with rejecting the message. And I've had friends in my life as well with this type of attitude, that what is the truth? What is the right religion? Do you believe like there is a purpose to life? And the answer is, I don't care, right? The answer is like, who cares, man? Just live your life. Who cares? Don't make it a big deal. Just relax, live your life. And this specific attitude, or there's just so many things to study, man. Like, who knows what the truth is? I don't care. Just whatever, right? I got my entertainment. I got my job. I'm living a good life. When death comes, I'll deal with it then. And this apathy really is the root cause of evil. Because what this apathy prevents us from doing is it also prevents us from recognizing the good, right? Because if we're apathetic towards evil, we don't want to get involved. We don't even want to do the good. And a lot of, we're hearing a lot of these reports from these Muslim communities in the United States, the apathy, the turning of the blind eye towards abuses that were going on. Same thing in the Catholic Church, right? That, look, I got my life. I'm popular. I'm living comfortably, and I don't want to get involved. This is apathetic, right? So heedlessness, I think, is really the root cause. And what the Quran does is that it gives us a recipe to get out of this heedlessness. And if we look at the majority of the world today, human beings, they are pushed into heedlessness by the entertainment culture, by the architects of modernity. And if you can keep human beings heedless, they forget their own nature, and you can use statistical behavioral techniques to control them. And this is really at the root of why the modern world is set up in the way that it is, why the globalists, they want to create the world that they want. Because if human beings are heedless, they don't care about their purpose. They don't care. Nursi says that you have $10,000 in your pocket, right, with a note. And you and this $10,000 is your free will, this beautiful connection to God, all this potential that you have. And instead of using the $10,000 to buy something, like opening up the note, you spend all of the $10,000 on like used clothes, right? You go to the market and you see somebody else buy like some broken shoes for like $1 or something, because they're poor, and you're like, oh, okay, let me do that. So you buy 10,000 used shoes. This is what Nursi says, right? So you didn't even bother to open the note and see, oh, why did I get this $10,000? Must be for something pretty important, right? So the same thing with human beings. When they're distracted, when they are heedless, they don't care about what they're capable of. They don't care about this connection to God. They don't care about the hereafter. And this is where all the evil flows. Evil people can get away with what they do. And on top of that, you entertain the snares of the nafs, right? The snares of this evil, the evil part of the soul that human beings have that command us to do bad things. You entertain it. You're like, well, you don't understand what human beings are. So you're like, oh, I want this. Okay, do this to this person. I kind of like doing that. Or I think I'm a different gender. Or any range of things, right? So we start to entertain it. We start to think that this is who we are, and we start to make it our entire identity. So I think the source of all of these things is really heedlessness. And the solution for that is the Quran. The Quran, that's why it's trying to awake humanity up, right? The humanity is asleep, and it's trying to wake them up. And the second solution is dua. It's supplication. Because in supplication, you're actually proclaiming your weakness to God. And you're actually proclaiming, my will, or I'm clouded with my apathy, wake me up. Help me do this. Help me get this. So supplication is really a powerful way to get out of this trap of apathy, I think. And
I also would like to add that anyone who's attached to Gaza is being purified. Just by looking at it.
I'm glad you mentioned Gaza, by the way. I think we all talk about it, actually, because it is the catastrophe of our era, and words fail me to even begin to describe what's an ongoing situation in that part of the world, and the reaction of the rest of the world to it. I'm thinking the West, of course, primarily. We try to understand what's going on, and the political understanding, of course, which may be fairly clear, but the deeper understanding of this evil that is happening and being perpetuated on countless innocent people. the continued ethnic cleansing and genocide we are sadly witnessing in such a graphic way. How do we? I know there are answers to this. I'm not looking for theoretical answers, but what words can we speak to ourselves, to others at this time of great suffering?
What Naz brought up two things. He said the apathy, you need to be woken up on one hand from a deep sleep of apathy. And he also mentioned another thing. He said that minimalism, when you start taking stuff away, you start realizing what's important. And having too much stuff, too much blessing, too much peace, oftentimes forces it. We clutter our life. We clutter our beliefs. Everything gets cluttered. And so what I look at Gaza, everyone who looks at these pictures, dunya gets taken out of their heart, little by little by little by little, until you stop complaining about certain things, stop prioritizing certain things, downgrade certain things, upgrade other things. And what is it that the Prophet, peace be upon him, said is the weakness of the end of time, the disease of the end of time? Love of dunya, and you fear death. Fearing death here means you don't want to fight for the truth. So when you're witnessing your people literally being mangled, babies mangled, 16 kids, all of them with a bullet wound in the head, you will not complain about certain things that you did complain about on October 6th morning, or 2023 or 2024. You're slowly, very slowly, we're shaving away little by little by little. We're shaving away just by seeing the visuals. Forget it occurring to us, just by seeing it. And nothing is happening. Nobody's doing anything. It changes your priorities. So I believe that Gaza is the beginning. It's a beginning of purification for us. People's hearts are changing little by little by little, whether they realize it or not. And that's how I view it. Like, what is Allah doing for his ummah through this? He's doing something for his ummah, for his nation. And I never view it as why isn't this kafir abiding by being nice to us? Why are the atheists not following justice? That's like the total wrong way to look at things, and a useless way to look at things, right? We should expect them to do this. I'm actually wondering what took them so long, right? That's how I look at it, right? Like the French, if the French ever do something to Muslims in their country, how many millions do they have? If they were to ever Holocaust the Muslims in their country, my honest response would be, it took you guys so long. I expected you to do far worse a lot sooner. Same thing, we have to look at them. So we should not even think about them. They're just tools. We should only have one perspective, that Allah Ta'ala is purifying us so that we can do something great in the future, right? We got to be able to do something great, but we can't because we're so clogged with love of dunya. It's like fat clogging up the arteries. You can't run, you can't move because you're clogged up. And for us, the visual, just looking at that stuff, it takes away little by little by little our wrong priorities, giving us room to do what's good and what's right. I think that's the perspective we have to have.
Yeah, powerful words. Naz, do you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, I'd say that the biggest problem that we have is the problem of death. Ultimately, that these little kids, these people, that they're dying, and of course they're suffering, but they're dying, and this is at the root of our, I guess, like what makes it so difficult. But as I said before, that if we have a solution to the problem of death, then we have a way of looking at even this tragedy in a different light, right? And Revelation gives us that solution. It tells us that death is not the end of the story. So we have to wait for the movie to finish, right? The movie is in progress at the moment, and we haven't reached the ending. And once the ending is reached, then God is all wise. Nursi says that if the creator of this amazing world, with the wisdom and the precision and the means and ends that he's put into creation, that you can clearly observe in creation, how beautiful it is, how balanced it is, how interesting it is. If this creator who built such an amazing palace, right, with all of this calligraphy and so beautiful, and then he forgets the roof. He forgets to put the roof on top of the palace. I mean, can you, like, does it make any sense to claim that this creator is going to forget to put a roof on top of it? No. So if as you're walking past this palace, you say, oh, the roof is not there. Well, it's taken a while. Why isn't he putting up the roof? Why did he make this? Well, he's going to put the roof there, right? So this is what Nursi says, and I think there's a lot of truth to his words. It doesn't suddenly just take away like all the pain that we're feeling about the people of Gaza, but it does give us perspective that we can transform what's happening for something good. And you know, the people of Gaza, there are a lot of these sort of sellout people in the Gulf and things like this. They're saying that, oh, the people of Gaza are being punished for their sins. What I love about Islam is that it tells you about all the different ways that evil can be used. Right? One of them is that you're punished for your sins. Right? Allah mentions that in the Quran. People do bad things, they get punished. But there's like a 99 list of other things that evil can be used for. And it's to lift your rank. You know, why were the prophets so abused and tortured and fought against? Is it because of their sins? It doesn't make any sense. Yusuf alayhi salam was a kid. Why did he get thrown into the well? You know? And one of the amazing things that Imam Sanusi mentions is that if Allah can, you know, not give the dunya to his most beloved creatures, such as the prophets, it shows you the estimation of the dunya, of material wealth, in the sight of Allah.
Yeah.
Because if it really increased your rank, and if it really like showed like you're an amazing person or a successful person, then Allah would give the dunya to all of his prophets.
Yep.
Right? So I think like we're short-sighted if we say, oh, the punishment, there's punishment going on in Gaza. No, the people of Gaza are honored, and they're able to handle this, which is why that they're going through this. Just as Abraham alayhi salam, he was asked to sacrifice his son. And I remember this PBS show where this Jewish scholar, he had an issue with this. So he said, you know, I don't know what I would do if God told me tomorrow to sacrifice my son. I couldn't do it. And then there was a Muslim scholar sitting next to him. He said, God wouldn't tell you to sacrifice your son, man. Like, who do you think you are? Right? He wouldn't tell you because you can't handle it. Right? So Abraham, yeah. Dr.
Yeah, I was going to say the other point that Islam elevates is human willpower, because whether or not something is a punishment or purification or elevation in rank is in our choice on how we react. If we react with more sins, it's a punishment. If we react with patience, it's purification. If we react by doing better, it's elevation. So we actually are the deciders of whether or not it's a punishment or a blessing.
Exactly. And it's so beautiful because that these types of difficulties can be used to raise our rank. And I don't wish them upon anyone. And I really don't say this lightly, that there are horrible things that happen in the world, and I don't want that to happen to me or my family or to anyone else. But the question is that how do we respond to these things if they do happen to us? Because we can't escape this question, because this does happen to people. And this is why the prophets, the greatest exemplars for humanity, they go through such suffering, because they can be a role model for these same people. That, look, Abraham, he's asked to sacrifice his son, and he waits actually 8 days before he does this, right? The Yawm al-Tarwiyah in Hajj, the 8th day, that when we start Hajj, it's called Yawm al-Tarwiyah because that's the day that Abraham alayhi salam actually decided to go ahead with this, right? But what is the conclusion of submitting to God's will? What is the conclusion? The conclusion is that Abraham alayhi salam not only gets to keep his son, but him and both his son, they become immortal for all time through the memories of all the people that commemorate them and praise them and remember their the sacrifice. So submission to God, paradoxically, you're asked to give up something, but you actually get twice the amount back. And the example of Abraham actually shows this to us. So even, sometimes we might even lose our life, but actually, if we believe in the revelation, we get eternal life back. So this is the difference between submitting to God and submitting to human beings or something else, right? Because God is not going to, he does not waste our sacrifices. He does not waste our deeds, as the Quran says so beautifully.
Okay.
MashaAllah. Well said.
Thank you. Well, we might conclude there, I think. And this is the book that formed the basis of this discussion, Pearls of the Deep, subtitle, How the Quran Transforms the Problem of Evil, How it Transforms the Problem of Evil. This is no ordinary book on the problem of evil. It's a very remarkable book in many ways. I do recommend you get hold of a copy. So well done, Naz, for your outstanding work, and Dr. Shadee for promoting it so persistently as well. I think you're both doing very good work. So thank you both very much indeed for this very special podcast, really. And I'm so pleased you spoke about Gaza at the end as well, because it's always on our minds at this time.
Thank you for having us.
My pleasure.
Thank you for having us.
Take care. Until next time.
All right.
Thank you. Assalamu alaikum.